Hello everyone, my name is Tibor Grul. I am a professor of ancient history at the University of Pécs, Hungary. In this video, I am going to show you some Jewish inscriptions which were written in Hebrew. If you are not yet familiar with the Hebrew alphabet, please continue listening all the same, because I am going to explain everything. Let's get started. Indeed, for those who never learned, Hebrew characters may seem very complicated at first glance. But believe me, it's worth memorizing them, because if somebody wants to deal with the history of Christianity, or biblical studies, or even ancient history in general, it's inevitable to know how to read Hebrew. Let's see first the letters one by one. Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, He, Vav, Zayin, Chet, Tet, Yod, Kaf, which also has a final form, Lamed, Mem, with also final form, Nun, with a final form, Samech, Ayin, Pe, with a final Pe, Tzadi, with a final one, Kof, Resh, Shin or Sin, and Tau. As you see, the reading order of Hebrew texts is right to left. It seems to be a good idea to buy a mug or a mouse pad with Hebrew letters. You can buy it at the Amazon if you want. Every time you drink a coffee or tea or work on your computer, you can check the Hebrew alphabet. In this presentation, I choose the simplest possible Hebrew texts, names on ossuaries. An ossuary is a chest or box made to serve as the final resting place of human skeletal remains. A body is first buried in a temporary grave, then after some years, the skeletal remains are removed and placed in an ossuary. Ossuaries have almost exclusively been found in and around Jerusalem. However, some ossuaries have been discovered in Jericho as well. The custom of secondary burial in ossuaries didn't persist among Jews after the Second Temple period, nor does it appear to be pursued by Jews outside the land of Israel. The ossuaries were made of limestone. Their usual length varies between 40-60 centimeters, their width is 25 or 30 centimeter, and their height is 30 or 40 centimeter. Levi Rachmani's catalog, published in 1994, contains 897 items, 62% of which is decorated with geometric or floral ornaments. Most interestingly, only 227 ossuaries, 25% of the total, are inscribed in either Hebrew, which is 61%, or Greek, which is 37% script. Only 2 ossuaries bear Latin texts, and 1 is written in Palmyrene. Our first text is a very simple inscription with names familiar from the New Testament. Yod, He, Vav, Dalet, He, Bet, Resh, Yod, Shin, Vav, Ayin. That is Yehuda bar Yeshua, in translation, Judah, son of Jesus. Fortunately, the letters are clearly seen, relatively beautifully carved. Nothing is missing. The only common noun is the bar, which is the Aramaic equivalent of the Hebrew ben, namely, son of somebody. Our second inscription is similar to the previous one. Let's spell the characters Yod, He, Vav, Samech, final Pe, Bet, Resh, Ayin, Gimel, Lamed, Vav, and final Nun. As you see, here we have 2 final forms of letters, the final Pe and the final Nun. Since Jews usually have names that are quite common, for example, Yehoseph, which means Joseph, they often add nicknames to, in our case, Joseph, son of Aglon, which means, according to the editors, son of the calf. It also happens occasionally that we find additional information about the deceased on the ossuary. Such is the case with this flat, unornamented, simple limestone bone box, which was found in a tomb in the northwestern part of Givat HaMiftar, the Jerusalem suburb, where numerous tombs have been discovered in the 80s. The large tomb, which contained 12 loculi, or burial niches, in Hebrew kochim, held the remains of a number of people who seem to have died in the turbulent period preceding the first Jewish revolt against Rome. The letters of the inscription are clearly legible. Samech, Mem, Vav, final Nun, Bet, Nun, He, He, Kaf, Lamed, He. Judging by the simple, flat ossuary of Simon, he couldn't be the chief architect of the temple, which has been permanently rebuilt from about 15 BC to 62 AD. More likely, he was a simple craftsman who at the same time was very proud to be participated in this gigantic venture initiated by Herod the Great. And now we have arrived at a very controversial ossuary, which was the object of a court trial in Israel for many years. Ever since André Lemaire, the famous epigraphist at the École Pratique at Paris, published this ossuary inscription in 2002, its authenticity has been vehemently disputed. Why? The text will explain everything. The Aramaic text, which is relatively beautifully carved, is the usual. It contains three names: Yaakov, Bar Yosef, Ahui, di Yeshua, which means Jacob or James, son of Joseph, brother of Jesus. The most conspicuous, of course, the naming of brother besides the father's name. There is little doubt that naming a brother was done only when there was a very meaningful reason to refer to a family member of the deceased, usually due to his importance or fame. Consequently, if the inscription is considered to be authentic, it might prove archaeological evidence for Jesus of Nazareth, his father Joseph, and his brother James. But, as I said, there is an ongoing debate on the authenticity of the ossuary, which is in private hands. I cannot decide this controversy, of course. All I want is to call your attention to the judicial testimony of Ada Yardeni, who is the #1 expert of Jewish epigraphy in Israel. She testified that the inscription is no doubt of ancient origin, inscribed by a single individual, and stated, I quote, "If this is a forgery, I quit." End of quote. Naturally, a plethora of books have been published in the last 2 decades, not only about the so-called ossuary of James, but other ossuaries as well, which might have been somehow connected to the word of the New Testament. Still remaining in the word of New Testament, a burial cave was found in South Jerusalem in 1990, which most probably belonged to the priestly family of the ill-famed Caiaphas, who served as a high priest during the public ministry of Jesus and who became the major antagonist in the trial leading to his crucifixion. On one of the richly decorated ossuaries, which measures 75 centimeters in length and 37 in height, 2 inscriptions were found: Yehoseph bar Caiaphas on the long side and Yehoseph bar Kapha on the narrow side. Although the identification is disputed, The second version of the name, Kof, Yod, Pe, Aleph, is the full form, the so-called scriptio plena of the name, absolutely identical with those in the New Testament. The S ending in Caiaphas' name is a Greek suffix typical for names. And now let's see a relatively recent discovery. In 2018, a column drum was found in the outskirts of Jerusalem, which was originally a Jewish potter's village. The site was eventually converted by the 10th Roman Legion into a workshop for ceramic building products. On the column drum, we find an inscription. Hananiah, son of Doudolos, from Jerusalem. Hananiah could have been one of the potters. His father's name, Doudolos, is based on the name of the mythological Greek artist Daedalus. It may have been a nickname alluding to the father's artistic abilities. It is interesting to note that although the village was very close to the city, Hananiah still found it meaningful to mention his Jerusalem origins. This is the first inscription which contains Jerusalem's name in scriptio plena, Yerushalayim in Hebrew. Hebrew inscriptions can be found in every areas where Jews lived in the antiquity. No wonder, because the sacred language was the Hebrew Bible and the spoken language was the Aramaic. Although direct quotes from the Bible are quite rare, we find some. This is the lintel over the entrance of the study house of the synagogue at Marot in Galilee. It recites a well-known blessing from the Deuteronomy. You will be blessed when you come in and blessed when you go out. From the Deuteronomy chapter 28. At the small village of Kfar Dvorah, which is Dabura, in the Golan, there are the remains of a 5th, 6th century synagogue. Its decorated lintel is the only archaeological finding from the area of the Tannaim in which the term Beit Midrash, that is, study house, appears. The lintel is exhibited at the Golan Archaeological Museum at Katrin. But we are facing a chronological problem concerning this inscription. While Eleazar HaKappar was a colleague of Judah Hanasi in the late 2nd or early 3rd century AD, he could not be the owner of this study house 2 or 3 centuries later. Therefore, we can consider this lintel inscription as pseudo-epigraphic or hagiographic title, which reminded the students to this important Tanna. It's a strange coincidence indeed, or some irony in history, that this Eleazar HaKappar did not aspire to be a person whose name is inscribed to an upper lintel. The father's sayings preserved one of his proverbs. Rabbi Eleazar HaKappar says, "Do not be like the upper lintel, which a person's hand cannot touch, nor like the upper bar, which wounds faces that bang into it, nor like the middle bar, which bruises legs that bang into it. Rather be like the bottom threshold, which everyone tramples, but even if eventually the building is destroyed, it remains in place," as you see it in the case of the synagogue at Arbel. I will talk about the synagogue mosaics in a future presentation. Now I just want to show you an interesting mosaic label inscription which is attached to a biblical scene. At Hukkok in 2012, a late antique synagogue was explored with fantastic mosaics illustrating famous episodes from the Bible. This image shows the 2 spies sent by Moses to explore Canaan carrying a pole with a cluster of grapes. The mosaic inscription reads as Bemot Bishnaim, which means on a pole between the 2. It's a direct quote from the Numbers, chapter 13. At last, I close this presentation with another mosaic inscription found in 1936 at Nahran, near Jericho, by the Department of Antiquities under the British Mandate. It is a very simple text which contains a widely known Hebrew blessing, Shalom al Yisrael, that is, peace upon Israel. The latter phrase, Israel, means that people of Israel, of course, not the country, which didn't even existed at that time. Finally, I put some thought-provoking questions. What were the Jewish names like? How can we prove that these names are identical with historical figures mentioned in literary sources? What was the role of inscriptions on Jewish ossuaries? What proves that Jewish epigraphic culture was significantly different from Greco-Roman epigraphic culture? Thank you very much for your attention.